Welcome to the TTS Talking Early Years podcast. Each week, we'll be joined by educational experts from across the globe, offering exclusive insights, inspiration, and guidance to help practitioners unlock the potential for learning in the early years. Hello, my name is Ruth Lue-Quee, your host for this week's TTS Talking Early Years podcast. I'm an educational consultant, also known as My Mummy Teacher, founder of MMT Play, and I'm passionate about inclusion and play within the early years. Throughout this series, we'll be discussing a range of topics aimed at supporting SEN in the early years, inspiring you with guidance and resources to enhance your practice. And I'm super delighted to introduce today's guest, Shardi Vaziri.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Ruth.
Hi, welcome to the podcast, and how are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you. I'm glad it's Friday and it's quite sunny today, so that's always a good thing.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful day, isn't it, actually, outside? Before we get started, I'm really excited on all the things that we're going to cover today. Should you just give us a little quick introduction about what brings you here, about yourself for our listeners?
Yeah, so I'm Shardi Vaziri, as Ruth said. I'm the founder of Early Years on a Shoestring, which initially was a platform to support practitioners to provide their children with enabling provision and excellent provision on a shoestring, so little budget. But the role's kind of evolved now. I'm an educational consultant as my full-time job, supporting children and practitioners in the early years. But SEND is something that's really a passion of mine. So I'm really glad that I get to come on today and talk to you about lots of things to support practitioners and educators in the early years.
Amazing. And I love that, a shoestring on early years on a shoestring on a budget, because as we know, all our budgets are super tight. So anything that we can do to get this provision right for our children, especially those at 10 as well, and using as little money as possible, is going to be absolutely amazing. So I'm really excited to delve in. In this first episode, we're going to be looking at different types of early years environments and sort of having a little chat around how we can create inclusive spaces to support all of our children. So, Juliet, what do we mean by different types of environments? What environments do we have within our early years?
So when we're thinking about early years, but actually if we think about the whole school level, we really should be thinking about our environments as the emotional environment. So that is the relationships with practitioners and educators and how the children feel when they come into school in a setting. Then you've got the indoor and the outdoor environment. Now, personally, I see them as one, but there is benefits to seeing them as two separate things, because obviously some children will prefer the indoor environment and some will prefer the outdoor environment. So when we're thinking about that inclusive environment, we've really got to think about those relationships and then the actual physical environment.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So you say that you prefer to see them as one. What's your reasoning for that? How does that work?
I prefer to see it as one, because rather than thinking, okay, I'm going to plan provision for the indoor environment and then I'm going to plan it for the outdoor environment, and a possibility of mirroring those activities or provision, if we see it as one environment, it's more likely that we're going to provide the children with really high quality provision that meets a range of needs, but also it means that the children then might see it as one environment. If we're thinking about the outdoor environment, they might want to then go outside with you and access that provision. So I like to see it as one space, one set of planning, one set of evaluations, but some practitioners prefer to see it as two different spaces.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's really key, isn't it? Because it all intertwines anyway. And if in our head we're thinking about the whole environment, the three elements that we've just said, the emotional, the indoor and the outdoor is one, we're going to make sure all the areas are accessed and that they're accessible to all of our children. And I really like how you spoke about the emotional environment first, because I think, as I'm sure you'll agree, if we can get that right, then we're on our way and we're going to be successful getting all the other areas right as well, because we need to create that nurture. We need our children to feel safe. We need them to feel secure for all our children. But this is especially important for our children with SEND as well, because feeling safe, having security, having routine, those sorts of things are what is going to really support them to want to begin to access the areas as well within their provision. What sorts of things would you say are essential for having within our indoor areas, within our outdoor areas, within our emotional environments, that are just part of our ordinarily available provision, our adaptive teaching that's really going to support our children within early years that have also got SEN.
Yeah. So just highlighting what you were saying about the emotional environment, what we're seeing this year particularly are children coming into setting who are not at what we would say is age-related expectations in all different areas of learning and development. And it's really important that educators almost take the pressure off themselves and stop thinking about all these schemes and all this content we've got to fit in, and really focus, specifically this first half term, really focus on that emotional environment, building those relationships, those routines with children, so they feel safe and secure in setting. So that when you do start teaching them, this is more, I'm thinking about reception when we're thinking about schemes, but when you do start teaching them the kind of curriculum content, they're ready for that learning. Now, ways that we can support all of our children, but particularly those children with additional needs or special educational needs and disabilities, is what you've just touched on, which is ordinarily available provision. Now, different boroughs and different parts of the UK might call it something different. So what we mean by ordinarily available provision is the things that you are implementing that's available anyway. So it might be your visual timetables, really important for all children, but particularly important for children with additional needs. So these are the timetable of your day depicted in visual icons. So there are lots of different companies out there. You could use PECS, you could use Communication in Print. There are obviously other companies that have developed visual timetables. You really need to make sure that you're using the icons as a whole school, the same ones as a whole school. So if you are using Communication in Print or PECS for one-to-one support, use that throughout your whole school. It makes sense. The children don't have to relearn things. So you'll have those visual timetables up at the front of your class, and you'll be referring to them throughout the day. So you might say, we're going to do the register now, and then you go through your day in the morning. Once you've completed a thing, so the register, you will then take that down, register finished, and let's look at what's next on our timetable. So like I said, this sort of provision will support all children, but it will particularly support our children with additional needs. It's important that your visual timetable is referred to throughout the day, so it doesn't just become wallpaper. So really refer back to that. If you see a child becoming a little bit anxious or nervous about what's coming next, take them over to the visual timetable and refer back to it. We've done register now, Shardi. Let's look at what's coming up next. And, we've only got maths until lunch. So they feel a little bit more calmer with what's happening throughout the day. Some children might benefit from a personalised visual timetable, particularly if they've got their own curriculum that they're working on, specifically with a one-to-one support member of staff or indeed with a class teacher. It might be worth breaking their day down just a little bit. So maybe just having in the morning and then at lunchtime or just before lunch, setting up their afternoon timetable so it's not so overwhelming as a whole day for them. Other things could be now and next boards. So again, breaking it down even further for some children who might see that whole day as a little bit overwhelming. So now we're going to do phonics, and next, something they really enjoy. So it could be that they've got a choice board with all of their pictures of things they enjoy. So it could be Lego, water play, sensory room, bubbles, whatever it is that they really, really enjoy. Phonics might not be something they enjoy, surprise, surprise, but you have that first and then they get to choose what comes next. So they then can see on their choice board, now is phonics, next is something I love to do, and I can't wait to do that. So I'm just going to sit through phonics, do it, and then I'll be able to have my bubble time. So I think the main things for me is a visual timetable, possibly a personalised visual timetable, and now a next board. And then the last thing is icons on your lanyard. So what we kind of don't want to see is loads and loads of icons on your lanyard weighing you down, but also it takes you ages to flip through and find the one that you want. You want the main ones that will support that specific child. So it could be they struggle with their toilet routine. So you might have a picture of the toilet. They might struggle with finishing a task and transition. So you might have one that says stop. So really think about the main ones that you want to have on your lanyard so that in the moment, wherever you are in provision, you've got access to those icons. So ordinary available provision is things that you are doing anyway as a whole class, but will particularly support those children with additional needs.
Yeah, I really like what you said there about making sure that it's taken away so that it's allowing the children the opportunity to physically see. And I think as well for some of our children with special educational needs, we can perhaps go one step further with them. And if it's where they're at developmentally, we can use an object. So we talk about using objects of reference, don't we, quite often? So I've used this within settings where for some children, so say if they had PE, we'd get like a little trainer out to show them it's going to be PE next, and then we'd use the trainer obviously to guide them where we're going into the PE hall, or if it's snack time, perhaps using like a physical fork or something to show them. But it's so key what you're saying to have that visual element and that structure, because they're going to feel safe, and when they feel safe, they're going to feel regulated, and when they feel regulated, they're going to be in that position to be able to learn. So I loved what you said about that. I think that was really, really, really key for supporting our children within there.
And of course, some children, Ruth, might not be ready for the icons that I was talking about. So like you said, the objects of reference, physical objects. And then the next step up from that would be actual photographs of whatever it is. So if it's outdoor play, a photograph of your outdoor classroom. Bubbles, a photograph of bubbles. So there's 3 steps there that you can take to support individual children or your whole class. And actually, it's about us meeting the child where they are. So yes, if you do communication print or PECS pictures across the school, have those, but really look at your individual unique children and say, are they ready for that? Or do I need to do photographs? Or are they ready for that? Do I need to do objects of reference? Absolutely.
Amazing. So I think a really key takeaway for our listeners would be, don't be afraid to strip it back. Always think, what's the bit before, to meet that child exactly where they're at within your provision. I think that works really, really well. Some amazing strategies that you've said there. What about the things that are sort of proactive strategies? So, if we're thinking about the management or the coaching within the classroom, the facilitation that we're doing to support our children, how are we going to be able to support them with transition time, things like tidy up, or if it is a school setting, perhaps if reception have to go and join Key Stage 1 for something, or things that are happening within their daily routine if they're a childminder, how can we support our children with those?
What I would say here is always give warning. So there's nothing worse than you're engrossed in your activity, whatever you're really engrossed in. So it could be building with the blocks. Suddenly a bell or a tambourine gets rattled. It's like, right, tidy up time, off you go. And you're thinking, I'm just playing with my blocks. I didn't realize it was tidy up time now. So what I'd always say is allow your children at least a 5-minute warning. So you might stop them using the same technique as you will for transition. So it could be a bell, could be a wind chime, could be your tambourine. Stop them, pause their play and say, children, you've got a 5-minute warning now, just until we start tidying up. You might then go round and talk to children in individual areas of learning. And what I used to do in my classroom a lot is ask the children if they were ready to pack that activity up. They might not be, particularly the loose parts and construction blocks. So depending on what time of the day it is, even if it's at the end of the day, go over and say, Shardi and Ruth, are you ready to pack that away this afternoon? Or would you like me to keep that out for you ready for tomorrow? So if they're in the middle of creating with loose parts and blocks as an example, they might not have finished that period of learning. They might want to carry it on the next day, on the afternoon. So allowing them to keep that out ready for when they want to come back to it is really important. So always a warning, give them that 5-minute warning, but also ask them, are you ready to pack that away? They might not be. And I always say to staff when I'm talking to them about warnings and things and visual timetables is, when you go to a whole day staff meeting, you really want to know when it's tea time, when it's lunchtime, and when you're finished for the day. So having an agenda up is really important for us as grown-ups. So imagine as 3 and 4-year-olds or younger, how important that knowledge will be for them to understand, okay, I've got 5 minutes left. Oh, Shardi said that I can keep that out for tomorrow. For you. So we're bringing that anxiety level right down by giving them that warning and giving them those options. It's really important to give children, where we can, that choice to keep it out, or no, I'm done. I've finished playing here. I'm going to pack it completely away.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really key when we when we talk about the early years, but children in general, it's actually quite often we can sometimes expect things of them that we wouldn't expect of ourselves. So like you just said, you want to know what time's lunch, what time's the end of the day, so you can sort of plan yourself, get cozy, and then you're ready to learn. It's exactly the same for them, and having that respect too, because if I just spent all that time playing and I was so engrossed in it and I built this beautiful brick tower or castle, and then my teacher came along and said, right, off we go, took it away, emotionally, I would be like, "Oh, that's upset me a little bit." You know, we don't play as much as we should as adults, but even if you do, like imagine if you've gone to, I don't know, a craft thing, or you've just made something out of pottery or done some painting, whatever it is for you, and it just got taken away without that warning, you would feel a little bit disheartened. You'd feel like, well, I just spent all that time doing it. And actually, it's so intrinsic to them. They were enjoying it. And we want to nurture that emotional environment, that it's really key that we treat them with that respect that we would treat our adults with as well, and really empower them to be able to work through that and learn that. And thinking about the emotional environment, we can use opportunities like that to develop their emotional skills. But again, giving them that warning. And I think you might have certain children that you think need a little bit more. So quite often with those, you might go and check in with them, and you can use like a strategy, something like, I see you, I hear you, labeling that for them. So I can see that you're there, and I can see, it's nearly 3 o'clock, so we are going to have to tidy up soon. But I bet you can do really good tidying up. You can show me how to do that, and really making a focus on those children that need that, as opposed to, some of the other children won't need that because they're already flourishing, and they're just going to crack on with it anyway. So really honing in on those children that you think need that sort of support them within those environments.
And we've got to remember the classroom is their environment, it's their learning space. So we've got to follow them on their unique journeys in that learning. And if we keep stopping it because it's fruit time or lunchtime or whatever, completely packing it away, we're not allowing them that long uninterrupted period of time to develop their ideas. So really, like you said, give them that choice and freedom within boundaries to be able to develop their learning and develop their relationship with you.
Absolutely. And then thinking about the environment as a whole, how would you design your space? So this is something that I would always do. I'd have my space in September, and then I'd be like, oh, that's not quite right. I'm going to change. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Or I would notice that children's needs are slightly different and their needs would change. How would you design your environment, your space, to accommodate the needs for all children with additional needs? What would you sort of look for? What are your top tips for that?
You need to look at your cohort and your children as a whole. So each cohort might be more interested in certain areas of learning or certain provision than previous years. So you might set it up in September, and it kind of became a running joke with my last head teacher in my last setting, because every time she'd come into my classroom, it would be changed. But it's what the children needed, and it wasn't quite right. So I'm not going to keep it how it was just because that's how I set it up in September. So you might set it up in September a particular way, but then as you're observing and noticing what the children are doing and where they're playing, you might realize, home corner's a little bit small. They're really engaging in that at the moment. I'm really loving it. So I need to extend that a little bit. Or the construction and loose parts area, it's backing onto my carpet. And actually, that means that if they're creating something, they're going to have to tidy it away because of phonics time or carpet time or end of day routine. So set your classrooms up in September, which of course you've all done now, but really step back and reflect on, is this space working for the children? Do I need to adapt this a little bit? That's also in terms of provision. So I've had a lot of people asking me recently about children taking everything out and being really excited in the space, but actually not really engaging in that resource or that area of learning. And what I would say there is to strip it back. So it's really lovely that you've got a really exciting, lovely space for the children to learn in, but that sometimes can be a little bit overwhelming and too much for them. So strip it back. If you've got 10 pots of loose parts, perhaps have 5. Obviously, you can build that up. So once the children learn how to use the resources, they know how to tidy it away, then you can start introducing more of that particular provision. But to support them and to really engage in that activity or that area of learning, you might want to just think about stripping it back. So I think thinking about your layouts, where things are positioned, You might want your loose parts of construction in a corner so they've got that space. You might want your home corner in a corner so they've got that space. And think about how you can be creative with your areas of learning. I didn't have loads of corners in my classroom. I had 2. So instead of having my reading corner in a corner, I had it on the side of a wall, and I used an old bed, actually, a child's bed, to create that area of learning. So I think my main overarching kind of message for your provision and space is set it up, but go with what the children need. Evaluate, reflect on what they're doing with that space, and don't be afraid to adapt it if you need to.
I think that's a really, really good point to end this episode on. Amazing. So strip it back. Don't be afraid to adapt it if you need to. Thank you ever so much. That's been brilliant first episode together.
Thank you, Ruth.
I'd like to say a huge thank you to our guest Shardi for joining us and providing such valuable insights. You've been listening to the TTS Talking Early Years podcast with me, Ruth Lue-Quee and Shardi Vaziri. If you've been inspired by our conversation today, don't forget you can sign up via the link in our episode notes to be the first to hear about future episodes and access exclusive follow-up content, including ideas for your settings and links to relevant resources.